Welcome. You are at the CCC,
where there are no outside issues. My name is Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, a seventh-year doctoral student in clinical psych, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
Yes, and I am LouiLou, and my pronouns are he and him. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club. I am in recovery for alcohol and crystal meth, and I am always in search of balance. Yes, and each week we'll provide and create a brave space where we can engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
Our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please remember to like, share, and ding that bell if you have it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, 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 ding.
And now the disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on At the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The material and information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we're just a couple of friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have Bonnie Violet back with us.
Yes.
For what were you going to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just said yes.
For folks at home who know Bonnie Violet used to co-host with us and is now with our production team, and she's been working on our marketing.
I love that. Our production team.
Team. And she's been behind our marketing. So if you've been noticing a bunch of stuff on YouTube or Instagram, Bonnie Violet is the mastermind.
Fun stuff.
And the clips. And yeah, she's really helped elevate the podcast.
Absolutely.
And so Bonnie Violet, you're joining us today for our conversation about body image.
So how are you doing?
Yeah, how are you doing, Bonnie Violet? It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I'm good. It was so interesting to just sit here while you do the intro and not say anything, you know. I wanted to keep jumping in.
You wanted to judge us, huh? You were judging us.
No, you've gotten a rhythm. It's great.
Well, not even a minute in, and Lewis is already trying to start a fight.
Right. Actually, I was trying to start a fight before then, but it's like, I'm all, whatever. Yeah, okay, it's all good.
That's true.
Bonnie, how are you liking your new place? How have things been since we've last seen you?
Yeah, I mean, things are good. I'm getting situated in Idaho. Yeah, not too much is, kind of same old. Nothing too major.
Yeah,
it's really cool because I was listening this like I do on Sundays. I was listening to an episode, and I remember you talking about in the episode. I'm just sick of moving. I just want to set down some roots, and so so that's really cool.
Very cool.
It's been nice.
Yeah, Lewis, how are you?
I'm good. I'm just happy to be here. I get this 15 minutes to kind of decompress because this week for some reason has not been, my dealings with people. It's like I'm having to say the serenity prayer under my breath. Yesterday, I really wanted to like kind of carve out a little shiv and
not a shiv.
Oh wow!
And God, follow Lewis. People around the blind spots at the store and just kind of check.
So horrible.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the truth is the truth. Can we try to pull the table closer to us? Okay.
Do you want it to be a part of you? What's the deal?
I do need it to be a part of me. How are you doing, Anthony? Well, I'm glad you asked. I am.
Wow.
I'm doing great. This has been a pretty, I don't know if crazy week. I don't know. I've been kind of anxious, kind of in my head, really trying to turn things over, trying not to control a bunch of things.
Does it have anything to do with your upcoming anniversary?
I haven't even thought about my anniversary.
Sometimes it's like I would get like early recovery. I would get like really kind of squirrely. Around my anniversary.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's funny you should mention that because so 5/18/18 is my sobriety day. I'll be celebrating 5 years, God willing. Let's not celebrate yet.
Well, no, but that's I know you don't get any. What do they say?
No fronts.
No fronts.
I'll be celebrating 5 years on the 18th, God willing.
That's when they say you're head pops out of you.
So, well, what's crazy is that so when I went out the last time, I was a couple days shy of 6 years.
Wow.
So things started to get a little dicey for me toward the end of the last time I was in my fifth year. But things feel very different this time around. I've talked about that a lot. Like, my recovery is never felt the way it feels now.
Yeah, because you're like a pillar. in the community.
Chill. No one's a fucking pillar. No one's a goddamn pillar. I hate no one's a pillar. Like all we are is just a bunch of sober people, and like some people happen to be more
bozos on the
just
bus.
a bunch of pillars on the bus.
Just a bunch of
pillars on the bus.
A bunch of pillars on the bus.
Is that what they call people who pop pills? Pillars?
No.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
That's yeah. You know the other one that really makes my fucking makes me cringe when people talk about an institution. Oh, they're an institution. Refer to people. No tea, no shade. We're not here to talk.
And I always say under my breath they should be institutionalized or whatever.
So today's topic is body image issues, right? Body image issues. And you know, that's one of those things that I don't necessarily hear people talk about in the rooms necessarily, but you know where I do hear it a lot is in private conversations, like with friends. And sometimes people aren't naming it that way. And so for folks at home who may not be familiar with the idea of body image issues, or say like body dysmorphic disorder or dysphoria, basically what happens for some people is that there can be like a discomfort or distress or displeasure with something that the way they see their body, right? So sometimes, you know, I think a commercial I've seen for this before is like you have someone who's staring in the mirror and they're looking at their body, but what they see is actually not what's actually there, right? So they might in their head distort like their stomach. They may think their stomach looks weird, or maybe their face looks different than the way that it actually is. But it's a type of kind of displeasure, discomfort, distress around what your body looks like, whether that be perceived or actual, right?
I agree.
So we thought about bringing this conversation up. I think, you know, it's starting to get warm outside, the summer, spring, during times where like people are wearing a lot less clothes or fewer clothes, or clothes that are like more form fitting,
like the naked guys
on the block.
we have some naked guys. If you're not from San Francisco, we have some naked guys who I call them naked guys because they're not nudists. They're just exhibitionists. They walk back and forth, and I wish I had a fraction of the confidence they had.
Yeah. But you know, they're not really
yeah, but if the sock is not covering your junk, it doesn't really matter. And every time I look out of somehow it's like it's kismet, or it's meant to be that I'm supposed to see them naked, and I'm like, seriously, I've seen them naked more than I've seen myself naked. I'm just keeping it real.
So before we dive in, Bonnie, Violet, or Louis, was there anything else you might want to add into like giving our conversation some context or shape?
Well, we did have a conversation when we first started the podcast. We did have this conversation, and I believe that it's a conversation that definitely could always be continued.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'm glad that we're taking this opportunity to talk about it some more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the big thing we weren't necessarily. I think we're just talking about body image in general. Doesn't necessarily have to be like good or bad. I think, but it was in speaking though about body, and you talking about the like the naked men, is that there was another bodied person that we know. I remember Allie one night. I was out with her, them, him. You know, they like to use all the different pronouns, and they decided to do like the guys were doing, and so they took off everything and walked around downtown, and it was such a liberating thing. And I was with them when they also did it at Pride, which, you know, I think to me that's a positive, you know, attitude about your body, to be able to just walk around and let it all hang out, so to speak. I was definitely in awe and kind of looked up to them for that.
I think the reason why there seemed like so much vitriol and whatever, I feel like what Allie was able to do is a lot different than what these individuals, because every time I look at them, I see in a lot of ways I see privilege. And I'm like thinking, how is it that you get to walk back and forth up and down the street? It's like on my days off, I don't walk. I walk up the street once because Castro, I didn't realize until I got sober that it's an incline on both ways. I'm seriously? How is that possible? No.
Right. What I think is interesting just about body image is that there's so many different ways of having there's a so kind of example body standard on and is able to expose of their body as opposed to say like a woman is able to expose of her body. Or there's also just kind of like the privileging of attractive bodies, like things that are considered conventionally attractive, right? There's the other whoa, what was that?
Sorry.
I was like, man, whose voice is that?
Body's recording us.
You.
Yeah, body. I know. I realized it was me. But right. So there are a bunch of different ways of having the conversation. And so for folks who are listening in, as usual, if anything comes up for you, you have any ideas you want to share, whether by yourself or just bodies in general, chime in. So I think one thing that I want to start off with is we aren't necessarily like Bonnie Violet just said, we aren't necessarily just talking about maybe like the negative parts of body image or like or body image. We're just talking about body image in general. I think for me it's really easy to kind of think about negatives around body image issues because I think part of that just is as a gay man, I think there's I'm probably not alone in this, but like as a gay man, there's certain expectations or there's a certain way that like certain bodies are privileged over other bodies. There's a lot of folks might be familiar with like the book The Velvet Rage, right? And in that book they talk about how gay men generally feel like they have to be superlative in some way in order to kind of like feel seen or like valued, etc.
I with regard, like maybe to shape this conversation, I'd like to go back to like recovery, early recovery. Like when we all get sober, I think what we all have in common is that whatever we were doing in our body, we're shifting. What like our body's not okay with the fact that all of a sudden we're super healthy after we hadn't been healthy. And I've heard you say this before, Bonnie, especially with what you're going through. And I know that early recovery is when I gained all this weight, and mind you, it was not like that I was morbidly obese. It's that I was morbidly like underweight. And the weight that I gained was the weight that I should have had on my body. And so my body was betraying me. It wasn't, I didn't recognize it. I didn't know this body. And so I think that early on, if I had relapsed at all, it would have been around not being comfortable in this body that, because I was just like, none of my clothes fit. And so I felt like, I was like, oh, you are just a big banana slug and this is not healthy. And I don't know, for lack of a better term.
Banana slug.
I know.
Yeah. And I think,
go ahead.
I think one of the experiences for me, I think much of my life, I'm just kind of reflecting about my relationship with my body over my lifetime. I'm really only in the last couple of years coming to really understand how different of a relationship I could possibly have with my body. Like when I was young, I was constantly getting corrected by my movements and my expressions. And so I became very uncomfortable in my body. Like I didn't know how to express. I didn't know how to move. A lot of the times it was because it was too soft or too feminine. And so that really created kind of like this, I don't know if neurosis, I'm not going to use that word because I don't know that it's correct, but it created this anxiety around being able to like just be in my body correctly in a way that was consumable by the environment around me. And then I just celebrated 15 years of recovery as well. And then also my HIV diagnosis, which was 24 years ago. And those are all very closely related to me. And though HIV caused me to really have a relationship with my body, I still don't think that I really lived inside my body and was super connected with my body until I started transitioning. And like, even like sexually, like I was very free with my body. And it was like, I never really had strong feelings about my body. I always just thought it was just there. But now that I'm actually like coming into my body, I just know that there's a different relationship that I'm having with my body than I had, over the years.
I hear that. And one of the things that both you and Louis have kind of gestured toward is this idea of the body as being a place that we live in, right? And what comes up for me when I think about that is like, if there was something I wish for other people and something that I work on is like making my body a safe place to come back to, right? And like some of that, like I used to think that in order for my body to be a safe place to go back to is like, oh, my body needs to be so sexy so that no one around me can fucking disapprove of it. And then and only then can I feel good about myself, which is what I've learned is like, that doesn't work.
No, not at all.
You know, like no matter how hard you chisel, no matter what you get your body to look like a sense of like self-value or self-worth can't be, for me, dependent on like what other people are seeing or naming. I'm also thinking about like the role of trauma and the way trauma shows up in bodies, right? Like I think we've talked about like The Body Keeps Score, that incredible book, right? And a way in which like, I appreciate you're saying like not being in your body, right? Like for a lot of folks who've experienced trauma, the body we can feel very detached from our bodies, right? So sometimes what that might look like is like during sex, we might be disassociated. We might not be in our bodies, right?
Absolutely.
Or if we're feeling anxious, we may not be able to feel sensations, right? And so I think there's like this kind of like place that we can, I like the place that I don't hear a lot of folks having the conversation about is like, what is it like to be embodied? Like, what does it actually feel like to be in there? Our good friend Benji he's a somatic therapist, and he talks a lot about like, how do you kind of like, where can you go to the origin of like, say if you're having like an anxiety or a pain, Dr. Sherry Taylor, she talks a lot about like, can you locate where like a sensation is and getting like curious about those sensations. But I think ultimately like what we're talking about is like beginning to have a conversation about actually being inside of the body and what does that look like and what does it sound like? Because often I think, maybe just in my opinion, we're having the conversation about like the gaze from outside.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think most of the time, like all the issues I had around it had everything to do with external.
Right.
And it wasn't until like I started doing the work that we do in recovery.
Right.
And whatever that looks like for you, because I had to get to the causes and the roots and all that. I had to figure out like, how is that showing up? I mean, because like you were saying, it's like, I didn't realize until just now, it's like, I didn't really think about my body. It just was there, and like I used to tell myself when I was in an active addiction, I was really sex positive and I was, this, that, and whatever, but that's not true. I was doing all of that because I was driven by the drug, by the alcohol. It wasn't my choice. I mean, it wasn't completely my choice. I mean, it was my choice because I picked up the drug and the alcohol, but everything beyond that, it was driven. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think about things like as simple as like drinking water. Right. Like sometimes I think about like the way I've treated my body. Like when I was drinking and using, like I was so bad to myself. Like I didn't get enough sleep. I didn't drink enough water. Like I would eat the most kind of like outrageous things. And I was just thinking a second ago, like if I had a child, like if I had a son and would I feed him the way I've been feeding myself, or would I, you know what I mean? Like, would I not monitor his like water intake the way you know what I mean? And I think that's really telling. I think it's really telling to like when you externalize like the way you treat your body from things as simple as like, how am I nourishing it? And then also I appreciate like the stuff about like sex, right? Which is like how, like, what am I doing with my body when I'm in relationship with another person? And then the other thing that's coming up for me is like also like the power of touch. Right. Which is like, that can bring up so much for people, depending on like what someone's history is with touch, whether it feels safe or not safe. Bonnie Violet, you were going to say something?
Yeah. There's just so much in listening to both of you. There was so much that I felt like I could kind of tap into, but just lastly, you were talking about touch and kind of one thing is, I think, feeling, what does it feel like to be in your body? And I know for me, I have been like, and like with transitioning, being on hormones, your skin actually changes. So literally everything you feel feels different. Your touch completely changes. And so I think that's part of a new relationship with my body that I've never had. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I just never noticed it before. And when you brought up the idea of like, one of the things that I've become aware of is now that I have a body that does not fit into many norms. Like before I could pass as a cis man, even though I was gay, like flamboyant or whatever, at least I was still like a cis man. Now that I'm trans, I have to really, and trans in public and visibly trans, I have to be really mindful. I have to actually, maybe I need to be dehydrated for a few hours because I have nowhere that I can pee for the road trip or for the flight to the other side of the country, or like there's a lot of things I have to be aware of. And it's really interesting how I can be more happy in my body. I can be proud of my body and what it's becoming. And yet still it could be a danger out in the world. And so it creates this weird dissonance, I think, with my relationship with my body. Cause at times I find myself thinking like, oh, I wish, like, should I press my breast down more? Should I, like all those sorts of things in order to be safe or okay?
Yeah. You're making me think about there's so much coming up now. So
Yeah.
like one of the things is like when do we feel safe in our bodies? Right? Like what are the things that like a person needs to do, or just personally, even folks listening at home, like when do you feel safest in your body? Is it when you're by yourself and you're breathing and you're like there's no physical threats? Like I can remember being like a young gay boy and fearing getting like the shit beat out of me because I was like, am I walking too gay? Is my wrist, like, you know what I mean, like am I not big enough? Am I not there? So there are all these different and so I often like I like looking back, I think a lot of my drinking and using was about numbing my body, and not just because of that, but it was about not wanting to feel whatever I was feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot. I mean, I have a very different relationship with my body now, and I have like a sense of safety, and I take care of myself in a very different way. But like part of that has been like a shifting in values, right? Like part of it is like like high blood pressure runs in my family, and so does cholesterol, so it's like, what does it look like to eat better? And like, what does it look like to, rather than like work out because you want to look a certain way, but you're working out because you want your energy levels to feel different. So I was thinking about like safety, and then like the numbing and not wanting to be in a body.
For me, this sounds cheesy, but it's like I listen to those things that say, I needed to fall in love with me again. And one thing is like I tried the route of like going to the gym and trying to, and mainly because of what I was getting from outside, from other people, and really no one was saying, hey, you need to do this, except for my doctor. He said, you probably could stand it, and all I heard was, you're a fat ass. But I realized that, like, and you said changing of the values. I think that's what it is. I have changed how I view me. I also realized that going like every day, all of this is brand new, because the body that I had before, like active addiction or whatever, I was a young man. I was a younger person. I'm older, and of course, I'm expected to carry a little extra, especially if I'm not doing anything to not. And then being in this environment, this not just the gay environment, but the gay neighborhood where everybody, in my opinion, probably is a lot skinnier or thinner than the normal average person. So I was just like, Louis, what is good for you? What works for you? And you got to be okay with it, because I'm not taking any affirmative actions to make it different, and I feel good in my body today. And I realize that because I'm doing the things that I can do, like eat better, uh, get sleep, get all the things. I'm not going above and beyond, but I am definitely focused on the basics, and I'm happy about those.
Do either one of you have like an opinion about like I'm thinking about like body shaming and kind of the movement, there've been movements over the last few years around like body positivity, right? And one of the things that I really appreciate about that movement is this idea that regardless of what my body looks like, I can feel good about myself. Absolutely. Right? Like just across the board. And I find, I have a friend who once said to me, she's like, Anthony, I've been a big girl my whole life and I've never had an issue with my weight. People have issues with my weight. I don't have issues with my weight. Right. And I feel like that's very difficult, right? Because you can get to a place where there's like self-acceptance and there's self-love. And that becomes really difficult to hold when you feel like you're getting like, competing messages from outside. So I guess, the question there is like, do either one of you have like an opinion about what does it look like to kind of like cultivate that kind of sense of peace and safety for yourself and your body?
Honey?
Not you passing the buck.
No. I wanted to make sure I didn't.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I didn't just jump in because
I feel it,
honestly,
yeah.
it's almost like, okay, so you know how you steer clear of social media.
Yeah, I fucking
Like,
hate it.
even if what I realize is, like, even if I'm not getting these obvious messages from the people around me or whatever, it's all of the subtle messages from media, from everywhere. And I
Yeah.
I think I think with everything else, it's like it's a matter of constantly, like, checking my temperature, you know, making sure what's up, and maybe kind of curating the types of things that I'm exposed to on a regular
Right.
basis, because I obviously I'm not going to be watching. I'm not going to be watching any bodybuilding, or I've never wanted to be about, but you know what I'm saying. I'm not going to be focusing on. Yeah, I just really have to kind of be mindful of that.
Yeah. And well, I
Go
feel
ahead.
like I feel like it's a journey as far as like our relationships with the body and the world. And I think when it becomes problematic is when we can't be anything beyond our body. It's kind of like, I think we can recognize it as like LGBTQ folks, that oftentimes people who are not LGBT, all they see us for is our sexuality, and we're never allowed to just be people. And I think that that can happen the same way with different bodied people. I know that oftentimes people who identify as fat will go to medical visits and it's always about their weight and it's never about like the other stuff. I know that I've had a very poor perception of people who go to the gym. And that's just the opposite way. But again, it's me only looking at them because of their body and not allowing them to have the rest of themselves. And so I think that's part of the journey is, am I living beyond my body? Like, am I having a relationship with life in the world beyond my body? And am I able to be around people who can see beyond my body, but also recognize that my body may be a part of that experience as well?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like, I don't know if have y'all noticed? Oh, hey Rose.
So Rose writes, agree with her. I've been big most of my life as well. Wait, sorry. I've been big for most of my life as well. It's how others view me. Yeah. Thank you for that, Rose. The other thing I feel called to here is like for folks listening in, it's like, how can we begin to make room and to help each other feel safe, in our bodies. There are a few, there's this one weightlifter, this bodybuilder in South Africa. His name is Noel, and I bring him up because there's been one of the things that I appreciate about like a lot of like his media stuff is that it's about not comparing. It's about like being realistic and having a relationship with your own body and lifting each other up around like if you have fitness goals, right? And if you don't have fitness goals, like still, like not allowing, at least I do this a lot with my friends, and maybe this is like an overstepping of boundaries, but like I don't like hearing my friends say negative shit about themselves, whether about their bodies or about like their intellect or anything like that. I don't normalize that around myself, and it might seem like a little parental, but I just feel like words are very powerful, especially the words we use toward ourselves.
I feel like that, like, I wish I could be more like that, because it's like, I think that, yeah, it's like supporting each other in that way. I think that to me, it's healthy. It might seem parental, but like, I think that sometimes we do those things without even being fully aware. And so if I love you and I care about you and you call me on it in a loving way, I mean, that's because I'm always talking about becoming aware. Like, if I'm asleep at the wheel and I don't know that it's happening, it's a gift to have somebody say, hey, do you realize that you've just been putting yourself down? I do this thing in the morning. I look at myself and I realize, again, because I'm not taking any different action, I'm like, I love you. I love this. I mean, because I'm healthy underneath, and that to me makes the most sense.
You had mentioned, or Anthony, you've asked
Also,
a
I've
couple
been
times.
looking really good.
Yes.
Sorry, there was a little bit of a glitch.
Go ahead.
You had asked, like, when do I feel most safe in my body, or that sort of thing. And I think for me, it's all about spiritual. Like, whenever I I can spiritually feel like I'm inside my body, I think that's when I feel the safest. And one trick, I guess, one way that kind of helps me become aware of my spirit within my body is a warm beverage in a cup. For whatever reason, to touch like a warm coffee cup or a teacup or something, it really just causes me to like be in my body. And I think also when I'm usually in a space either with myself or with people that I really love when that sort of thing is happening. So for me, I feel like that's a practice that I can do to feel safe in my body.
We have a comment.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we have a comment. Jaylon writes,
Jaylon.
at Anthony, simple answer, treat others how do you like to be treated, but that's in a perfect world. Thank you, Jaylon.
Mm.
You know, I'd add one angle to that, which is some people treat themselves like shit. And,
Oh, yeah.
you
Oh,
know, and
yeah.
like sometimes
Yeah,
that's how they treat other people, you know?
Don't
Yeah.
treat me the way you treat yourself, please.
Yeah, and if you're one of those people.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the one thing I feel kind of compelled to say is that, yeah, and I'll speak for myself, is that, you know, for a very long time, I thought like happiness was a destination or comfort was a destination. And I love that you bring up spirituality. I think a lot for me around happiness and around feeling good has been an inside job.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it has been about like making peace with those things about myself that, you know, I may not feel good about. You know, one of the kind of maybe best things that's ever happened to me is like if I sprain my ankle or I hurt my back, it's when I don't have the thing that I realize how I've taken something as simple as walking for granted, or I've taken being able to sit upright for granted. And so I think about, you know, I get this one precious life, this one precious body to live in, and like, how can, you know, so I've had to spend time around like figuring out what feels good, you know, and I think a big part of that is trusting how you feel.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think sometimes
yeah.
we might force ourselves to like, we might gaslight ourselves and think like, oh, you know, like I'm not anxious in this situation, or no, it's like, if you're uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable. And that's a place where you can begin to start having like an honest conversation with yourself. And maybe that's something you take to prayer or to therapy. But I think getting real with like whatever it is that's coming up, you know, whether when you look at yourself or you look at another person or whatever. Do you see where I'm going?
I do. And as you had said something, get it. Like, I realized like, and this has a lot to do with recovery and the work that I've been doing. It's like, that trusting is so important, because I found like, the one thing that will cause me to turn away from someone is if you get me second guessing myself.
Oh,
You know, it's just the worst way to be. And it's like, we talked about it over the years with friends and what have you. It's like, for me, like, I will take the temperature. I will talk to people about things or whatever. And when I make a decision, I'll try to live in that decision. But then you have someone who will, like I said, try to get, question. And I don't want to be obnoxious, but it's like, I have had to get to a place where I'm all, you know what, if you're not in my space, in my circle, if you're not that person, I'm not going to entertain. I'm not, because that's, for me, that's the safest. And the last thing I'll say, I agree with you, Bonnie, about like, for me, like, I feel safest in my body when I'm with me, but when I'm with people that I love and they love me, like those times when I feel like I can, where I'm not worried about what they think about me, what I look like or whatever. I'm just, maybe it says, if I'm not really into you, that's when I feel like I'm the safest.
yeah. What are you talking about? We have a comment.
Oh,
Jaylon writes, call is coming from inside the house, especially in our subculture. Classic projection. The big book says you can't transmit something you don't have.
absolutely.
That's right. Well, with AIDS now. Rose writes, thank you for that, Jaylon. Rose writes, body image is a self-esteem issue that at times we shame ourselves about if we are having a bad day. Well, then we don't get a great shout out, great ourselves. We don't feel great about ourselves. And yes, spirituality plays a huge role in how we respect ourselves. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Rose.
One of the
Go ahead.
Okay.
one of the things that was coming up for me is like, so like in relationship with other people. And, there have been times in my life when other people noticed that I wasn't in my body, or that I was having a relationship with my body that maybe wasn't connected or well. And so I think there might be opportunities. And also one of the things is, I now with my body, I wish more people would ask me about my body, would ask me about what my experience is or my changes, which might feel countercultural and probably problematic. But I think with the right people, to me, it just helps me feel seen. It helps me also be able to talk about what's going on with me. So I think we can play an important role in people we love and their relationship with their body. I know that I haven't been able to do it on my own, and it's taken sometimes other people bringing an awareness to what might be going on for me, whether it was in sex or, I remember somebody telling me, your whole body is here during sex once, and really kind of bringing that awareness, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're reminding me of like physical intimacy, right? Like that's something that can feel very threatening, or it can feel,
Not
alive,
at all.
or yeah, right, not
Yeah.
at all, or it could feel very uplifting. Like I was not, for example, like hugging is like a relatively new thing for me. and a part of that is just kind of like, there's history there, but it's like I just don't want to be that close to people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And one of the things that I've learned is like, no, actually, I don't mind like a hug if it's like someone I know, right? Like if there's context for it and like there is that level of closeness. But that like I had to learn that boundary. Like I had to learn like, no, not everyone has access to your body.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
No, not everyone has access or should have access. I mean, thank God for the pandemic, because it's like there's some people that I'll never have to hug again.
Well, and I think sometimes a hug could be a great way too to gauge whether or not you're in your body or not. Because there are times when you can hug people and you're like, I know where I just don't feel super connected, and I realize that I'm not even there. And there's other times that I can really feel what's happening, be present to that person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even like I think about like sex, and sex like can be a dissociative thing where like you're literally out of your body, or you're using sex to be out of your body, or sex being something that can bring you into your body and right. And connecting. And I, and like, I've said before,
you come to having sex.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Oh my God. I don't even know what I was going to say.
I know this guy, what's interesting? It's like, I was going to talk about this before, but so I feel like we've been here, there, everywhere, because there's so many different like sub conversations to have within this conversation. I mean, I think that I'm grateful. Number one, I'm grateful that we're having this conversation, because like we talked about before, like you know how you were saying you don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and I think that there might be shame and kind of weird feelings, especially if you're someone who has the standard, like if you seem, someone who has the kind of, how do you say it? They're like good looking.
Okay.
Conventionally attractive or whatever. And you want to be somebody. Those who don't like you may respond. Like I was talking to a customer about the thing today, and he was saying, "So did you hear Megan Fox? She said something to the effect like she's never felt comfortable in her body." And to hear, and as much as I want to give her space to kind of feel that way, I'm thinking she's amazing, she's perfect, or whatever. And it's an understandable, like, I don't know. So
well, I think that highlights what I was saying earlier, which is, it is an inside job. Looks are deceiving, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like, like all the praise. It's kind of like with drinking and using. It's like one is too many and 1,000 isn't enough. If you don't have like an inner peace or like an inner appreciation for yourself, not all the compliments in the world are going to help. Yeah. The other thing I think about is like, and if your self-worth is hinging on your physical appearance, well, we all age, our bodies change, right? And yeah, I've actually heard that in the room, you know, like a lot of like men are like, they're aging and they're freaking out because they're like, oh my God, you know, like I'm balding or I'm gaining weight or, and it's like, you realize, oh my God, I didn't realize how much of my value I was putting on what other people saw and what other people see, you know what I mean? Or what other people say. And it makes me think about, you know, self-esteem, and how in the rooms we talk about, well, the way we develop self-esteem is by doing esteemable acts, right? I feel like that's such a good place to be, which is like, what will it take for you to feel good about yourself? And I can almost guarantee you, not all the praise in the world is going to get you there. You know,
maybe we normalize talk and make it okay for me to talk about right now in this moment. I'm not comfortable with this, because and not have there be shame around me talking openly and honestly about the things about the fact that I feel that I'm not perfect, or that things aren't the way I want them to be. Because talking about it, getting to a place where I'm, you know, acknowledging it, then I can start like thinking about what it is that I need to do. Maybe it's that somebody has a feeling the same way, and then we can talk and relate, because it's kind of like what you were saying. Like, if I'm feeling some way about this body and someone says, well, yeah, you know what, that's, you know, maybe look at it a different way. Maybe, you know, maybe it's that you're not a blob. Maybe it's that, you know, you're only, you're only comparing yourself to someone who, it's a tough one.
Go ahead, Bon.
I feel like we might not talk about body and image and all that stuff a lot, but it is constantly at play. And I think it's constantly at play in recovery. I mean, I know that I've experienced it just in my transition, as far as like who talks to me and who doesn't, but you can see it. It's very palpable when you can see that certain people are objectified, and in some ways they get more attention, or they get invited to more fellowship, or than maybe the person who isn't. And so then in that vein, we all kind of get robbed, because then these people continue to get objectified, as they do everywhere else in the world. And then you have folks who continue to go unnoticed, or don't begin to have a good experience. And that's to say, like, and that's one thing that's great about the program, is that it does create an opportunity for that not to be the culture, for that not to be how things work. And there's oftentimes when, you know, it's not an issue, but you can sometimes see that play out in some, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, absolutely. I mean, lookism is a real thing. Like, for folks who may not be familiar with that term, lookism refers to mating of.
I lost them.
Can Bonnie, not Bonnie Valley, can Brandon not hear us? Can y'all not hear us? Oh, I don't know. I'll keep talking just in case.
I think we can hear you. We just can't see you.
Oh, okay. So, so I think where I'm wanting to kind of land with this is, since we only have so many more minutes while we're live, is there are three things that come up for me. It's like, you know, for folks listening in, you know, if you're my friend and you're sitting across from me and you were dealing with, say, some body image stuff, my first question to you would be like, what do you need? You know, like, what is it that you need to feel good in your body? And that question I asked, that, like, not what will other people see, it's like, what do you need? Do you need to feel safe in your body? That's the first one. And you know, and like, how can you start to develop gratitude for what you have? And then lastly, you know, I think about when, like with pursuing anything, happiness is an exercise. Like, we have to, in my opinion, we have to pursue and we have to work toward doing things that bring us joy. Joy is not just something that kind of pops up. You know, in the same way that we can meditate over problems and issues and things that make us depressed, we can also begin to do the same work to kind of cultivate comfort and peace of mind. You were going to say something.
No, I wasn't. I was letting you wrap up so that we can.
Yeah. So let's start closing off before we continue talking offline. Well, off the air.
So the Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBT recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
Bonnie Val, you want to take that one?
You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us at castrocountryclub.org/podcast.
Absolutely. And tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. ish Pacific Standard Time. And we go live in our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels every time we go live in our studio.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're just listening to us for the first time, once the camera stops rolling, we continue talking and that content gets uploaded to podcasts.
And thanks so much for having me back on the show.
Yeah, Bonnie Violet, it's so
Absolutely.
nice to have you.
Aren't you here again next week?
Yeah, aren't you?
I'm going to be back on the 20th of June, and I'll be in person when we talk about allyship just before Pride.
Love
Lovely,
that.
Lovely. Okay.
So nice to see you, Bonnie Violet.
Wonderful.
Nice to be seen.
Yeah, and as usual, we love you, everyone. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye.